Section 57 of Armadale. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Armadale by Wilkie Collins. Book the Fourth, Chapter 3, continued. They were all foreigners, and they quite deafened me by their jabber. I tried signs, but before I could make them understand me I was seized with another shivering fit, and was carried below. The vessel held on her course, I have no doubt, but I was in no condition to know anything about it. Before morning I was in a fever, and from that time I can remember nothing clearly, till I came to my senses at this place, and found myself under the care of a Hungarian merchant, the consignee, as they call it, of the coasting vessel that had picked me up. He speaks English as well or better than I do, and he has treated me with a kindness which I can find no words to praise. When he was a young man he was in England himself, learning business, and he says he has remembrances of our country which make his heart warm toward an Englishman. He has fitted me out with clothes, and has lent me the money to travel with, as soon as the doctor allows me to start for home. Supposing I don't get a relapse, I shall be fit to travel in a week's time from this. If I can catch the mail at Trieste, and stand the fatigue, I shall be back again at Thorpe Ambrose in a week or 10 days at most after you get my letter. You will agree with me that it is a terribly long letter, but I can't help that. I seem to have lost my old knack at putting things short, and finishing on the first page. However, I am near the end now, for I have nothing left to mention but the reason why I write about what has happened to me, instead of waiting till I get home and telling it all by word of mouth. I fancy my head is still muddled by my illness. At any rate, it only struck me this morning that there is barely a chance of some vessel having passed the place where the yacht floundered, and having picked up the furniture and other things wrenched out of her and left afloat. Some false report of my being drowned may, in that case, have reached England. If this has happened, which I hope to God may be an unfounded fear on my part, go directly to Major Milroy at the cottage. Show him this letter. I have written it quite as much for his eye as for yours. And then give him the enclosed note, and ask him if he doesn't think the circumstances justify me in hoping he will send it to Miss Milroy. I can't explain why I don't write directly to the Major or to Miss Milroy instead of you. I can only say there are considerations I am bound in honor to respect, which oblige me to act in this roundabout way. I don't ask you to answer this, for I shall be on my way home, I hope, long before your letter could reach me in this out-of-the-way place. Whatever you do, don't lose a moment in going to Major Milroy. Go, on second thoughts, whether the loss of the yacht is known in England or not. Yours truly, Allan Armadale. I looked up when I had come to the end of the letter, and saw, for the first time, that Bashwood had left his chair and placed himself opposite to me. He was intently studying my face, with the inquiring expression of a man who was trying to read my thoughts. His eyes fell guiltily when they met mine, and he shrank away to his chair. Believing, as he did, that I was really married to Armadale, was he trying to discover whether the news of Armadale's rescue from the sea was good news or bad news in my estimation? It was no time then for entering into explanations with him. The first thing to be done was to communicate instantly with the doctor. I called Bashwood back to me and gave him my hand. "You have done me a service," I said, "which makes us closer friends than ever. I shall say more about this, and about other matters of some interest to both of us, later in the day. I want you now to lend me Mr. Armadale's letter, which I promised to bring back, and to wait here till I return. Will you do that for me, Mr. Bashwood?" He would do anything I asked him, he said. I went to the bedroom and put on my bonnet and shawl. "Let me be quite sure of the facts before I leave you," I resumed, when I was ready to go out. "You have not shown this letter to anybody but me?" "Not a living soul has seen it but our two selves." "What have you done with the note enclosed to Miss Milroy?" He produced it from his pocket. I ran it over rapidly, saw that there was nothing in it of the slightest importance, and put it in the fire on the spot. That done, I left Bashwood in the sitting room, and went to the sanitarium with Armadale's letter in my hand. The doctor had gone out, and the servant was unable to say positively at what time he would be back. I went into his study, and wrote a line preparing him for the news I had brought with me, which I sealed up, with Armadale's letter, in an envelope, to await his return. Having told the servant I would call again in an hour, I left the place. It was useless to go back to my lodgings and speak to Bashwood until I knew first what the doctor meant to do. I walked about the neighborhood, up and down new streets and crescents and squares, with a kind of dull, numbed feeling in me, which prevented not only all voluntary exercise of thought, but all sensation of bodily fatigue. I remembered the same feeling overpowering me, years ago, on the morning when the people of the prison came to take me into court to be tried for my life. All that frightful scene came back again to my mind in the strangest manner, as if it had been a scene in which some other person had figured. Once or twice I wondered, in a heavy, senseless way, why they had not hanged me. When I went back to the sanitarium, I was informed that the doctor had returned half an hour since, and that he was in his own room, anxiously waiting to see me. I went into the study, and found him sitting close by the fire with his head down and his hands on his knees. On the table near him, beside Armadale's letter and my note, I saw, in the little circle of light thrown by the reading lamp, an open railway guide. Was he meditating flight? It was impossible to tell from his face, when he looked up at me, what he was meditating, or how the shock had struck him when he first discovered that Armadale was a living man. "Take a seat near the fire," he said. "It's very raw and cold to-day." I took a chair in silence. In silence, on his side, the doctor sat rubbing his knees before the fire. "Have you nothing to say to me?" I asked. He rose and suddenly removed the shade from the reading lamp, so that the light fell on my face. "You are not looking well," he said. "What's the matter?" "My head feels dull, and my eyes are heavy and hot," I replied. "The weather, I suppose." It was strange how we both got further and further from the one vitally important subject which we had both come together to discuss. "I think a cup of tea would do you good," remarked the doctor. I accepted his suggestion, and ordered the tea. While it was coming, he walked up and down the room, and I sat by the fire, and not a word passed between us on either side. The tea revived me, and the doctor noticed a change for the better in my face. He sat down opposite to me at the table, and spoke out at last. "If I had 10,000 pounds at this moment," he began, "I would give the whole of it never to have compromised myself in your desperate speculation on Mr. Armadale's death." He said those words with an abruptness, almost with a violence, which was strangely uncharacteristic of his ordinary manner. Was he frightened himself, or was he trying to frighten me? I determined to make him explain himself at the outset, so far as I was concerned. "Wait a moment, doctor," I said. "Do you hold me responsible for what has happened?" "Certainly not," he replied stiffly. "Neither you nor anybody could have foreseen what has happened. When I say I would give 10,000 pounds to be out of this business, I am blaming nobody but myself. And when I tell you next that I, for one, won't allow Mr. Armadale's resurrection from the sea to be the ruin of me without a fight for it, I tell you, my dear madam, one of the plainest truths I ever told to man or woman in the whole course of my life. Don't suppose I'm invidiously separating my interests from yours in the common danger that now threatens us both. I simply indicate the difference in risk that we respectively have run. You have not sunk the whole of your resources into establishing a sanitarium, and you have not made a false declaration before a magistrate, which is punishable as perjury by the law." I interrupted him again. His selfishness did me more good than his tea. It roused my temper effectually. "Suppose we let your risk and my risk alone, and come to the point," I said. "What do you mean by making a fight for it? I see a railway guide on your table. Does making a fight for it mean running away?" "Running away!" repeated the doctor. "You appear to forget that every farthing I have in the world is embarked in this